Hi, it's Storm Schoonover. Just get ready for my final video presentation. Today we're looking at gender and resiliency and identifying strategies to increase resiliency in military-connected youth. Starting off today, I thought we'd look at these two memes. Resiliency, it's important, especially for the military family. As of 2012, Gardner, Arnold, and Menery reported that there were 1.2 million children that have one or both parents employed in active duty service, and that on average, students move 6 to 9 times between kindergarten and graduation. This population of children are at an increased risk of emotional and behavioral problems and high-risk activities. Resiliency helps with adapting to the unique stresses of military life, particularly parental deployment and frequent transitions. Which begins our literature review. Our first military stressor we'll be looking at is the impact of deployment. Deployment increased depression, or military affiliation for children increases the probability of mental health problems, especially depression and anxiety. Overall, mental health visits of children with deployed parents increased, doubling from 1 million to 2 million between 2003 and 2008. The dramatic increase in mental health visits implies that military deployment, which began in 2001, have a significant impact on military youth. The length of deployment also has direct consequences for youth. Children whose parents were deployed more than 11 months had the highest levels of mental health diagnoses. Children are also at risk for neglect from their caregiving parent during deployment, and the combination of lengthy deployments and increased likelihood of parental neglect directly impacts the mental health of military children. Additionally, military youth with the deployed parent are twice as likely to use illegal or prescription drugs as similar non-military children. This population is also more likely to consume alcohol and should be considered at high risk for alcohol and drug abuse, especially during times of high familial stress. Additionally, risky behavior increases as much as 75% when mom is deployed, and sexual activity in teen pregnancy increases when dad is deployed. Female adolescents with deployed parents are more likely to binge drink, whereas adolescent boys were more likely to consider suicide and depression. The degree of stress associated with deployment and reintegration is dependent on the relationship strengths and weaknesses in the family and the overall mental health of each family member. In order to promote overall wellness, psychological resilience, and decreased deployment-related stress needs to be a top priority for public health professionals. Academic achievement can also suffer as a result of parental deployment. Teachers and counselors pointed to low parental engagement, parental mental health problems, and students' increased household responsibility and stress and anxiety related to deployment as factors affecting students' ability to function well in school. The second stressor that we're going to look at is frequent transitions. Military children on average attend 5 different school districts before graduation. Johnson and Ling determined that frequent school changes actually enhance resiliency. Additionally, communities with strong military culture ease the transition for many military youth. However, military children are more likely to experience educational gaps because of the frequent transition. The differences in state curriculum standards and graduation requirements also exacerbate educational gaps. It is important to note that resiliency is not static, and it can decrease with increases in stressors. Research has found that military children, though faced with additional stressors, are more resilient than their non-military peers. This is attributed to many factors. Often, military-connected youth have previous exposure to different cultures and environments and are more likely to adapt to their environments following a military transfer. Children are more resilient during times of stress and transition when supported by a military community and others in military life. Community support and positive military perceptions also increase resiliency for military family members. Academic resiliency. The military lifestyle impacts student academic resiliency. Children whose parents have been deployed 19 months or longer since 2001 have lower achievement test scores compared to those who have experienced less or no parental deployment. Educational support can increase resiliency, however. The impact on educational opportunities for military children encourages more streamlined process for credit placements, record transfers, etc. for military children to enhance academic success and on-time graduation. Great. Additionally, schools that focus on sharing best practices to support military children can also encourage resilient military youth. Schools can encourage service members to join students at school, broadcast graduations, etc. to help with this stressor. Programs that include optional extracurricular support groups that focus on resilience and building peer relationships also help support resiliency. While the research on gender and resiliency is minimal, evidence suggests that there is a connection when looking at outdoor adventure programs, and that can perhaps provide insight regarding military children. Overholt and Ewart found that women experience risk differently than men, and they found that men who shared emotions and communicated effectively were shown to have higher resiliency levels. However, females who had perceived levels of resilience had higher perceived levels of resilience after completing an adventure program, while many male resilience scores decreased. Overholt and Ewart concluded that females and males experience develop resiliency differently, and second, that the mechanisms of an adventure-based program that facilitates the effects may be different for women and men. Milburn and Lightfoot identify additional gender differences at school. School staff reported that boys exhibit anger and aggression, while girls had somatic complaints and seemed depressed during parental deployment. Leads us to the research tab. With regards to these findings, research on gender-specific resiliency in military-connected adolescents is needed to understand what interventions can increase emotional and academic well-being. Research has previously looked at resiliency in military families. Gender-based analysis has not been completed. Research has not identified gender-specific methods for increasing resiliency among military-connected adolescents. Milburn and Lightfoot further identify a need for adolescent-specific research. While Williams and Bryan identified certain home factors and school factors that improved academic resiliency among urban African-American male adolescents, there is a gap in information concerning resiliency factors for military adolescents. And high resiliency among military-connected youth is important in decreasing high-risk behavior, decreasing behavior problems, and increasing emotional health. Our guiding research questions for this proposal are: how does student relationship to caregiver affect resiliency for military adolescent males and females? How do contextual factors affect resiliency for adolescent military-connected males and females? How does adolescent age and gender influence level of resiliency for military-connected youth? How does gender and age influence strategy use to improve resiliency for military-connected youth when exposed to military-related stressors? This is a mixed. Okay, the purpose of this mixed method study is to identify how gender and age affect military-connected youth resiliency, identify skills and techniques used by highly resilient military youth, and examine how skills and techniques that are used by highly resilient military youth vary based on gender and age. The results of the study will allow researchers to understand how gender and age of military-connected youth influence resiliency and skill development. Participants in this study were limited to students enrolled in domestic-dependent elementary and secondary schools in grades 6 through 12. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the Fort Campbell, Kentucky School District was identified as a school that fits this criteria, with a total enrollment of 1,780 students in grades 6 through 12. This mixed methods embedded study will have two phases. Phase 1 will be a resiliency survey, and Phase 2 is a focus group interview. For Phase 1, the students will be identified through stratified sampling. To determine the sample, students will be divided into gender groups by grade level. 32 male students and 32 female students will be surveyed for each grade level, for a total of 20%. These students will be randomly chosen through random selection after being separated by gender and grade level. Total 224 female students and 224 male students will be administered the survey for a total of 28% of the population. They will be administered the survey to get a proportional random sample of military adolescent female and male students. Stratified random sampling data collection will occur in order to get a precise, clear sample to illustrate the levels of resiliency for military-connected adolescent males compared to military adolescent females by grade level. The information will be used to develop focus groups for phase 2 of the survey in order to answer additional research questions. The second phase of the study will begin after the students have been given the initial survey on resiliency to target the focus group participants. Sample will be determined using purposive sampling. Based on survey results, highly resilient male and female students will be identified and asked to join the focus groups. There will be 4 focus groups: 6th and 8th grade males, 6th and 8th grade females, 9th and 12th grade males, and 9th and 12th grade, or 9th through 12th grade females. The questions will focus on the catalyst questions included with the instrumentation for phase 1 and military stressor-related questions that were researchers developed. Those include: how does moving with the military affect you personally and academically? What strategies do you use to make moving easier? What advice have you given a peer new to the military lifestyle? Have you had a parent deploy? How does your parent's deployment affect you personally? How does your life change when your parent deploys? What things do you do while your parent is deployed that help you with these changes? And what does it mean to be military dependent? For instrumentation, the researcher is going to use the Child and Youth Resilience Measure, or CYRM 28, created by the Resilience Research Center. It uses a 5-point Likert scale survey with 28 questions, divided into 3 subgroups: individual traits, relationship to caregiver, and contextual factors. The CYRM 28 was assessed using Cronbach Alpha, paired sample t-test, and interclass correlation coefficient, testing for validity or proving validity of the instrumentation tool. It will take approximately 20 minutes to complete. For phase 2, participants will be selected using high mean scores on all 3 subgroups from phase 1. Each focus group will be asked the same questions, and the answers will be transcribed for later analysis. It will occur in a neutral school environment, and the Resilience Research Center catalyst questions and military stressor specific questions will be used. This is what the CYRM 28 looks like: 28 questions on a 5-point Likert scale from not at all to a lot. For data analysis, data will be analyzed using the standard deviation of the data collected from the CYRM 28 research tool for each subgroup of the test. A ANOVA test for variance will be used. The independent variables are individual traits, relationship to caregiver, and contextual factors. The dependent variables are going to be age and gender. Using this analysis, the following research questions will be addressed: how does adolescent age and gender relate to the level of resiliency for military-connected youth? How do contextual factors affect resiliency for military adolescent males and females? How does the relationship to caregiver affect resiliency for military adolescent females and males? Individuals who have a high resiliency score. On each section of the CYRM 28 will be invited to participate in the second phase of the study. That phase of the study will answer the research question: how does gender influence strategies to improve resiliency for military-connected youth when exposed to military stressors? For phase 2, the interview responses will be recorded and transcribed. The researcher will use qualitative content analysis to analyze transcribed interviews. The researcher will use a coding frame to condense and group the content of the interviews. The framework will be developed from analysis or after analysis of phase 1 data. The researcher will read the transcript, organize the information into categories, looking for patterns and themes. These will be described in order to identify gender-specific factors and skills used by military-connected adolescents to support high resiliency when exposed to military stressors. The researcher will specifically analyze the data looking for coping strategies, strengths, and involvement in extracurricular activities specific to gender and adolescence. The researcher will use member checking to validate the results and limit researcher bias. Focus group participants will be able to evaluate the researcher transcripts prior to analysis. They will be asked to attest to the accuracy of the recording to ensure that the researcher does not inadvertently bias the data. Which leads us to our references page. this has been an excellent semester. I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. Thank you very much.